I always get super nostalgic around this time every year because exactly 3 years ago I was in India, in Goa, at Kranti Yoga doing my 200-hour yoga teacher training, and I just wanted to share my experiences of that month and what it meant to me, where it's brought me to where I am today, and also just answer some of your questions that you dropped me. Just before we go into, I guess, the questions that some people had about my training in particular, I'm going to give you a brief overview. I say brief, I'll probably waffle on for a little bit. An overview of what our kind of like daily life was like when we did our yoga teacher training. We were there for about just under a month, about 26 days. So we would be training and moving from Monday to Saturday, so 6 days a week, and we would have every Sunday off. So we would start your average day waking up and practicing from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. There was a 2-hour chunk in the morning where we would practice Ashtanga Yoga. So for the first 2 weeks, it was led by our lead trainer, Vicky, where she was guiding us. And like I said, it would take about 2 hours to do. Ashtanga Yoga, you practice a primary series, which is the exact same movements and poses every single day, and just get used to that. And then for the last 2 weeks, it was more Mysore style. Mysore style means that we were in charge of moving through the practice ourselves. So we learned to recognize what poses would be coming up and we would move at our own pace. So again, this would differ between individuals. Some people would get through it like an hour 15, others would take 2 hours. After that, we would have a little bit of a tea break, go get some tea, some water, have a little walk around, and then come back to the shala and do a 1-hour class on meditation or pranayama or yoga nidra or kriyas, where we were led by Fran. And each kind of day was a little bit different. So one day was more meditation specific. She would guide us through a meditation. Some days we would do the kriyas, which are really, really fun. Like we had neti pot, which is where you pour water through one nostril and then it comes streaming out the other. And we all did that on the beach, and it was just quite silly. It was just quite a laugh to do. We did some breath work, sat on the beach in a big circle, which was beautiful underneath the sun. We learned about the chakra systems. We learned about other components of the breath. So that was quite varied and quite a fun, but I found that just as challenging as the morning practice. In fact, even more so because I had never really done that kind of practice before. After that, we would then have about an hour or so for breakfast, where everyone, not only on the 200-hour course, so my course, but the 300 hours, and the teacher and the owner Kranti would come and sit, and we would all have breakfast in the sort of communal space. And it was like a buffet style breakfast. We helped ourselves to whatever we want. The kitchen staff were always so welcoming, so lovely, and yeah, it was really good food. It was vegetarian and vegan. So super accommodating to myself at the time. That's part of the reasons why I chose the school. And yeah, we had the rest of the hour to wander around, have a little walk if we wanted to. And then following on from that, we would then have a 2-hour anatomy and adjustment class, where we would break down the postures in the primary series, looking at the muscle groups and the joints involved in that certain asana, and then we would take it more practical and look at how we would adjust individuals in that pose, maybe even modify depending on the individual's needs. So that was quite fun. It was more, like I said, hands-on. We got to work with different bodies, we would swap, we would get to know each other a little bit more, particularly in the first kind of week. So that was really enjoyable. We would then have a break for lunch. That was a little bit longer. It was about an hour and a half. So some of us would eat lunch if we wanted to, others maybe later. And then we had the rest of the time to maybe go for a swim in the sea, maybe go drive somewhere else to a neighbouring village, or maybe even drive to that neighbouring village for lunch, which I did a couple of times with some of the other girls, which was really nice just to have a little bit of an explore. Quite often after lunch, I would go sit in a coffee shop and have an iced coffee with coconut milk, and the guy, the barista there, got to know me quite well. He was like, "The regular?" I was like, "Yes, please." And I would just write in my diary. I kept a daily diary of what we did, so I'd quite often sit in there and just write and get lost in my book and my work, or towards the end spend that time doing a revision for our assessments that would be coming up. So really ideal kind of setting. And then after that, we would have another, say, hour and a half long class. It would depend on the week. We would either do yoga, lifestyle and philosophy, where we learn a little bit more about the history of the practice, learn about the Bhagavad Gita, which is kind of like almost like the Hindu version of the Bible. I don't really want to go down that route, but again, it's a lot of the components of yogic lifestyle were sort of drawn from that, and we learned about things like the Vedas and the scripts. Really, really interesting, but quite heavy stuff. And then sometimes we would learn about teaching methodology, so how we would conduct ourselves in a business environment if after we left Kranti we wanted to do this as like our full-time job, things we could sort of look out for. We would have a little snack break, which would be like watermelon or other fruits or like some homemade cakes. And then we would do quite often a workshop in the evening. So we had like an acro yoga workshop. We had a more like animalistic kind of movement workshop. We had 2 workshops delivered to us by Kranti, who owned the Shala. So he did, I think, a transition workshop and a backbend workshop, which was super, super fun. Learned quite a lot. And then I think we would finish a day around 6 p.m. where we would go, we'd all usually watch a sunset, maybe more of us go for a swim, and then we'd have dinner in the evening all together. And of course we were like free to go out and have dinner at other places if we wanted to. Then quite often, depended again on the day, we would either have an evening activity planned. So we quite often had like movie nights, or there was one full moon that we had where we had a big like drumming fire circle, which was really, really fun. Or we were just left to our own devices and we could go out, with our friends or whatever and go explore or just have a quiet time in. It didn't really matter. But I was there at a really beautiful time. So I was there for the Holi Festival, which is the festival of colour. So I think about in 3 weeks in, and we took time out of our day and we were involved with like the locals and, throwing the colour and everything. We had that as our evening activity one day. I think we took the afternoon off to celebrate it. And yeah, it was just really, really, really fun. It was quite a nice thing to be involved with, especially as someone who is half Indian and I've never experienced that before. So that was really silly and really fun. But I remember one of my best friends from the course, Regan, she has blonde hair and pink dye was thrown in, and I think it took like 4 days for this pink dye to eventually wash out. Obviously with my hair you couldn't tell, but it looked really magical. And then towards the end of our training, so like 3.5 weeks to the 4th week in, we were doing more of the practical assessments where we would be assessed teaching a class to 3 others, and we would get feedback from our peers and our teachers. So that was like a whole day because we were all rotating. So that was quite exhausting, but also very, very fun to be creative and to actually teach for the first time. And of course we had our other assessments as well. Then towards the last week, so I think this was the second to last day, we were all together. We did a really beautiful morning practice out on a dam. So we left the Shala at about, I think 5:30 in the morning, drove about half hour to this place. We all set up along this dam in like one like super long line, everyone. So the teachers, a 300-hour course and the 200-hour course. So there must have been about 40 of us, maybe 45. And we all started the practice, Ashtanga Yoga, together. As we were going through the sun salutations, the sun started to rise like over the mountains behind to reveal like the water beneath us and where we were. And whilst we were going through the practice and our breath sort of internally building the heat, the sun was building the external heat. And there's this one particular photo that was taken of all of us going throughout this practice, which highlights and shows all of us in the movements at different paces, which I will insert here. And it was just so idyllic. Afterwards, everyone finished at their own pace. Some of us just walked around in silence. Some of us just sat on the wall and absorbed the sun. And it was a really, really nice experience to have had. So yeah, that was one of my favourite memories from Kranti. Of course, as well, this is very like individual to Kranti Yoga and what they do. The way as well that the course started, we all had a fire circle at the beginning. We had Hare Krishnas come in. The Hare Krishnas came in halfway through and then at the end as well. So it's quite a nice little reminder to see like our growth throughout and how we all became so connected to one another. So the opening fire ceremony was there. We set the intentions, we set the understanding, sort of like the precedent and the energy for the course. And it's really fun looking back because we were all such strangers at that point. For a lot of us, it was the first time that we all met. And then our closing fire ceremony was obviously when we were graduating, when we had all gone through this journey together, when we had all grown through highs and lows. Of course, there were like moments where like we cried and stuff when things were just like mentally too much, mentally taxing. So yeah, it is the most intense thing I think I have ever done. It's not as simple as just a yoga retreat because you're in it, like I said, like 24/7 with these groups of people. But yeah, that fire ceremony at the end was really, really nice and just like full of love, full of good vibes and all that kind of stuff. So all in all, it was a very transformative time for me. I hate to sound cliche, but it has very much shaped me into the individual who I am today. It was the first time I travelled alone to a place where no one knew who I was. I was going back home to the motherland, which I had never been to before, never really connected to that side of me. And, you know, I was doing something that I really, really loved. So it then sort of put the foundations in to bring me to where I am today. And that's a lot of the reason why I am like this now. So yeah, very special, very magical time, to say the least. I haven't done it complete justice at all. If you wanted to actually know a little bit more about my hands-on experience when I was there in the present moment, I wrote weekly blog posts about this. So my first week at Kranti, my second, my third, my fourth, which are all on my website. So if you wanted to have a little read through, feel free. Just before we come on to some of your questions, I just wanted to read a little poem that one of our teachers shared with us in our philosophy class. So, watch the waves in an ocean. The higher the wave goes, the deeper is the wake that follows it. One moment you are the wave, another moment you are the hollow wake that follows. Enjoy both. Don't get addicted to one. Don't say, I would always like to be on the peak. It is not possible. Simply see the fact it is not possible. It has never happened and it will never happen. It is simply impossible, not in the nature of things. Then what to do? Enjoy the peak while it lasts and then enjoy the valley when it comes. What is wrong with the valley? What is wrong with being low? It is a relaxation. A peak is an excitement and nobody can exist continuously in an excitement. So I just wanted to share that with you guys because I think it's, for me at the time, it was a very important learning to have had and to really kind of allow me to not always feel guilty when I didn't do things 110% relating to my yoga practice. So understanding that, of course, there are going to be peaks and troughs when it comes to the intensity of me practicing, which is then translated and filtered into other aspects of my life. Like, of course, I'm not always going to feel 100% productive every single day of the month because, especially as a woman, that doesn't work with our cycle. You need to slow it down and rest when you need to. So that was a very, very big learning for me, for being present to my current needs, allow these highs, but also allow these lows, because we can't just sustainably be in the highs. It's just going to make sure that the low is even lower and more intense. And, you know, it's just like the poem says, not in the nature of things. We need this motion of flux to go through. So, yeah, that was a really beautiful and kind of validating poem and words to hear. So I hope that kind of does for you too. I've got some questions from some of you guys about my teacher training. So, Chloe asked, how long had you been practicing yoga before you did your teacher training? I had been practicing for about just under 4 years, but again, the majority of those 4 years were all self-taught. So I had gone into the training without any formal tuition before. I think I sporadically dipped in and out of attending like public classes, but this was the first time that I had stepped into say a studio and had some real guidance and real direction with my physical practice and someone being there and telling me what to do or how to move, how to adjust, which was really, really important for me to have had. That question kind of leads on quite nicely to one from Intellect Grime. They ask, at what point do you think someone is ready, both physically and emotionally, to do a yoga teacher training? So one of the guidelines for the majority of yoga teacher training courses is that you should have a regular, consistent practice for about a year or so, where you're practicing upwards of maybe like 4 times a week. The reason why they say that, and it is sound advice, is because if you're practicing 6 days a week, minimum of 3 hours every day, obviously that is quite physically taxing for your body. So you need to have that sort of pre-existing experience and perhaps even stamina, quote unquote, to deal with the stress and the load that you're placing on your body. So again, just to put that into context, I was really surprised how fatigued I felt about 3 days into the training. So I thought I had a fairly strong practice. I was practicing like 90 minutes every day. And then by day 3 of the teacher training, I was like, oh my God, my traps, my shoulders, my legs, everything feels so intense and tight. I definitely wasn't alone in feeling this. A lot of the other students were as well. But also because I wasn't exposed to a lot of the postures we did. So I think just to help yourself, you need to have exposure, you need to have familiarity with a fairly strong and consistent practice. So that's, I guess, covering the physical aspect of it. But then it doesn't really matter how long you have been practicing yoga, because you gain so much from doing the course in itself. So it doesn't matter if you've been practicing for a year or 10 years, I think as long as you have consistency, that's the main thing. Emotionally, I feel like it's one of those things that maybe comes with your own intuition and comes to you when you're ready. For me, I had planned this about a year in advance. So it was always like on the back burner, being like, okay, in February I'm going. And I was kind of mentally preparing myself in the build up to that. I was processing my emotions. I was writing blog posts about it, which you guys can read if you want. And just trying to get myself into that framework of what I'm going to expect. But I also know quite a lot of the guys who were on my course, it was a very snap decision. They were traveling around India and they were like, oh shit, I'm going to go do a teacher training. So I think it's super dependent on the individual to tell whether or not you're emotionally invested. But also, I guess, doing it not for the sake of just doing it. I feel, unfortunately, that the world of yoga teacher trainings has almost started to get a bad rep, like your gap year kind of traveler. It's a thing to just do for the sake of doing it rather than having good intentions. So yeah, it's really asking yourself, why do I want to do that? Of course, you don't have to become a teacher after it. A lot of the people just came to expand their own knowledge with the practice and understand a little bit more in depth about the different components of yoga that you just simply wouldn't get from a 60-minute vinyasa class. So yeah, I think intention comes to the emotional side for when you're ready. Spider Monkey Lou asked a couple of questions. They asked, how did you pick this school? And then how did you prepare? So the way I picked the school was, I think I literally just Googled yoga teacher trainings in India, because I knew I wanted to go to India to do it because it's the birthplace. It was also this idea of me coming home and coming back to where I'm from. So I knew already that I wanted to go to India. And then I'm pretty sure I came across a website called bookyogateachertrainings.com, and I just put in a bunch of places within India, and I had 10 selected, and I was just going through all their course curriculums, seeing if it sort of matched my checklist of what I wanted to experience, the sort of content that they covered, and I eventually whittled it down to 2. So it was a decision between Kranti Yoga and Sampurna Yoga. They were, again, both in Goa, about, say, 20 minutes apart, so same kind of location, very, very similar. The thing that broke the deal for me, I got in touch with someone who went to Sampurna Yoga, and they just sort of gave me some real honest advice about their experience there, and that kind of led me more drawn towards Kranti, so I eventually chose that place and that school. But yeah, I totally get how overwhelming it can be because there's a lot of choice out there. But yeah, I'd say kind of go with your gut feeling if you can with that. To answer the second half of the question, how did I prepare? Again, I had a backlog of about 4 years of self-practice, which I just continued with. I had been planning for about a year to go here, so I was already consciously thinking about it. But of course that didn't stop the nerves. I was so nervous to go and be fully immersed. But I just tried to continuously reassure myself that it will all be okay. You're doing such a unique experiential thing, and just try and be present with yourself. And even if you don't walk away being a teacher, it's such a beautiful experience to have had. So that's what I kept trying to tell myself. Another question from Spider Monkey Lou. They asked, what do you wish you had known before you went? So interestingly, Grace, who I met at Kranti, we actually have a podcast where in season 1, we actually dedicated a whole episode to this topic, 5 things we wish we knew before we started teaching yoga. So a little bit different. But I guess I don't think I had a bad experience at all when I went to India to do my training. So I don't think I wish I knew anything prior to going. Maybe the fact that I was really sad when I did leave was something I wish I could have prepared for it a bit more. But then again, that's kind of a given, it's kind of natural. So I don't think there was anything I would have changed, really. That's a really, really difficult question to answer, because if I had known, say, X, Y, and Z, would that have changed my perception of my then experience? So yeah, interesting question. Okay, so final questions. There's kind of 2 that I'm going to pair together. First of all, Mary asked, I really want to do a training, but I want to ask you, did you feel safe training and traveling? And then the Jelly Bean asked, how did you get the opportunity to go to India? Okay, first of all, yes, I did feel safe traveling. Like I said, it was the first time traveling alone, so it was a bit nervous in that regard. I was like, am I going to be able to make it to the space okay? But it was all okay in the end. I think you kind of just got to trust that things will work out. So I did feel safe traveling. And of course, yeah, I felt super safe training at Kranti Yoga. The area that I was at on Patnam Beach, there was, oh my God, I think like 3 other yoga studios on that strip. So it was a very well-renowned place to have like yoga students wandering around. And even on the beaches higher up, like I said about Sampurna Yoga, there was like, oh my God, maybe 6 others. So it was a very common place to go to do your yoga teacher trainings, and there's a lot of Western tourists over there. So yeah, I did feel safe going. And to answer the following question, how did I get the opportunity to go to India? Again, this kind of ties in with why I wanted to go. I wanted to go because it's the birthplace of yoga, because I'm from there as well. So I chose India accordingly. This was actually my 21st birthday present from my parents. I didn't want anything else from them apart from doing my teacher training. So this was their present to me for turning 21. It's the best present I've ever received, because it's brought me to where I am today, and without that I wouldn't be here. So I'm forever grateful to my parents for trusting that is what I wanted, and for providing me with that. So that's how I got to go. Sylvia just asked what were the kind of like practical things that I needed before I got to India. So what kind of vaccinations, visa, and like what did I pack? So vaccinations, you definitely needed to get some. I'm pretty sure I got like rabies and tetanus and maybe yellow fever. Again, you're gonna have to like double check on this kind of stuff, but I did have to get vaccinations before I went. And as a UK passport holder, I did have to get a tourist visa. Even though my mum is Indian and has an Indian passport, they told me after I paid for this tourist visa that I was like applicable to have an Indian passport, which was really annoying. So that was kind of frustrating, but yeah, I did need a visa to go there. And then thirdly, what did I pack? So I was going at quite a beautiful time of the year. It was nice and warm. I think like towards the end of March that I was there, it was getting up to about like 33 degrees on average. So I did pack leggings, but for the majority of the time I lived in shorts and like tank tops, and I bought some dresses and some clothes when I was out there, and even my swim kit as well, just so I could go in the sea. In terms of shoes, I think I only took 1 pair of shoes with me. I was barefoot like the majority of the month that I was there for. So yeah, those are kind of the practical things. Also sunscreen. To follow up on that, even though I knew about a year before that I was going to travel, I think you had to get your jabs maximum or minimum a month before you went to India. So yeah, obviously you had to pre-plan that, and even with like the tourist visa as well, that took quite a while to get sorted out. I think I had to sort that out again 8 weeks before I eventually went. So it's quite a bit of like pre-planning to do that in advance. So also just to sort of like give some more information about these types of trainings that happen in India, because it is a school, they kind of do year-round training. So I think the season opens in September after the monsoon season, and it runs until April, May time, and then they're closed for again the monsoon season. So it is kind of like a year-round, almost like academic kind of year, where you have like rolling students in and out. So yeah, I just happened to choose mid-Feb into mid-March. But yeah, it's again totally dependent on what kind of time you're available to go and when you would like to travel there. I guess just to finish off, going back to the podcast that me and Grace do, which is called the Chaturanga podcast, and I'll like link it in the description. We did do a whole episode on season 1 where we went in depth about the types of yoga teacher trainings that there are out there, comparing the more immersive trainings like we both did in India to the year-long sort of part-time trainings that you can do. So if you are considering going to do a yoga teacher training and want a little bit more information about the differences between the two, after COVID's done, maybe have a listen to that, because yeah, we really go in depth with it. So yeah, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed and it was like informative, you learnt some stuff. As always, any questions, suggestions, let me know, and I'll see you next time.